during the second leg of her Africa trip in Nigeria, the British Prime Minister signed bilateral agreements on defence and trade. After Brexit, Theresa May plans to reposition the UK as Africa's leading trade partner among G7 countries. CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam explains.
Theresa May setting foot in Nigeria for the first time. The British Prime Minister arrived here from South Africa, where she promised to increase UK direct investment in the continent by more than $5 billion. Nigeria is Africa's biggest economy and also its most populous nation, potentially the biggest market for British goods and services. May held closed-door meetings with President Muhammadu Buhari and signed bilateral agreements on defence and trade.
The UK has a strong presence already, of course, as the oil industry, but we would like to see, more in the manufacturing sector, for them to invest also in, because they get a lot of raw materials out of Nigeria, but if they were also developing manufacturing capacity in Nigeria to be able to add value to a lot of the raw materials for export, I think that's an area where we could where they could make a difference.
Trade volume between Nigeria and the UK is estimated at about $4 billion. And Theresa May is looking to double that over the next decade. Besides trade, Britain has also been helping Nigeria with its fight against Boko Haram. The Islamist militant group has killed tens of thousands and displaced millions in the northeastern part of Nigeria in recent years. Under the terms of the Defence and Security Agreement reached here, Britain is expected to scale up its anti-terrorist training of Nigerian troops and supply them with added specialist equipment. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Meanwhile, another European leader is also on the continent. German Chancellor Angela Merkel is currently visiting Senegal. She will later tour Ghana and Nigeria. Like Theresa May, Merkel is on a mission to boost trade relations with Africa. However, the German Chancellor is also focused on migration. She's pledged Germany's support in the fight against illegal immigration to Europe. During a media briefing with Senegalese President Macky Sall, Merkel said the right conditions need to be created on the African continent to prevent people from trying to reach Europe.
La coopération sénégalo-allemande se porte bien.
The Senegalo-German cooperation is doing well and goes back to 1960, the year of our independence, and since then it has accumulated several million euros of investments. This cooperation has covered various sectors in the past and focuses today on the energy sector, particularly with energy efficiency, access to electricity for households, and training in the field of solar energy.
Nicht nur in den Städten, sondern eben auch in den ländlichen Bereichen und deshalb.
We hope that it will be a regular development in the cities, but also in the rural areas. This electrification project of 300 villages will be beneficial, and this is just the beginning. We need to learn some things about competition, and Senegal is open with respect to bids. With the Compact Initiative with Africa, we will strengthen our businesses to come and invest, and my delegation, which is composed of businessmen from small businesses and multinationals, will work in this direction.
Right, joining me now is Professor Adam Zolo. He is an international relations expert and political scientist at the University of Nairobi, and is here just to unpack for us all of this interest and what it means to the continent. Professor Zolo, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So we're seeing a great interest in Africa. The German Chancellor is here, British Prime Minister is here, the French President was here a while back. Why this big interest in the continent?
Well, basically, you can always talk of the untapped potential. And basically, you can talk of Africa's lost decades, especially when the Cold War was there, to such an extent that you'll find that at that time it was a place in which ideological rivalries were playing out. But in the post-Cold War period, the international scene changed, and we saw the East coming in through China. and Africa starting to diversify its foreign relations. And therefore, to that extent, it made Africa a place in which now everybody would like to have a piece of it. And therefore, you have China-African relationships under FOCAC, you have America coming along, you have the European Union coming, but you also have the individual countries of the European countries also seeking bilateral trade outside the multilateral trade of the European Union. So basically, that's what's happening.
Right, so you've talked about Africa's potential, but is the continent taking advantage of these overtures, or is it just sinking deeper into debt?
Well, I think there are two sides to the coin to the question you ask, in the sense that if Africa wants to gain as a unit, then it would have to operate from either the regional economic communities such as EAC, ECOWAS, and SADC, and that gives them a bigger bargaining power, the way the EU, for example, does. But you'll find that most African countries, even though they are members of this REX and the African Union, also choose to engage in bilateral trade, which is basically from a national point of view. So to that extent, when they engage from a bilateral point of view, the whole of Africa might not benefit as such, because it becomes a relationship that is between two countries. But if they want to bargain as a unit, then maybe the gains for Africa as a continent might be felt. Otherwise, you'll find a situation in which only the big guns will benefit more. And if you look at the visits that you have mentioned recently in terms of Britain, for example, then you look at the countries where Angela is going, is South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, and the like.
All right, and speaking of Kenya, President Uhuru Kenyatta just came back from a visit to the White House. He's now hosting the British Prime Minister. He is heading over the weekend to China for FOCAC. What is the lure for these countries here in Kenya?
Well, basically, I think you have to look at it that the only long-term planned meeting of all the visits that you have mentioned was the FOCAC one, which is going to next week in Beijing. You'll find that the invitation by Donald Trump, the US president, only came 3 weeks ago. And he was quite aware that the president of Kenya will be going to China. In between, Theresa May has called into town. And basically what is basically happening is that Kenya is a strategic country within the Horn of Africa, and therefore every global power, for different reasons, will want to have a share of Kenya because of her strategic position. If you look at from China, it's more from a business point of view, given that China is the leading creditor to Kenya right now, and its infrastructural development is known in the country with the standard gauge railway, and now you see the US wanting to build the 6-lane road. When you look at the US, they are also interested in countering terrorism in the Horn of Africa, so they need Kenya as a partner. If you look at Britain, basically their interest is that they are exiting the European Union, and Kenya having been their colony, they'll need to revive the trade relationship. But from just the meeting that has happened, we've also seen that they are interested in security cooperation in terms of building capacity, and Kenya is interested in the fight against corruption in terms of making sure that the proceeds of corruption are not kept in Britain and the like, in addition to trade and investment. So basically, Kenya is proving that it's the new kid on the block in the region.
Okay, and so speaking about the big event, of course, this coming week is the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, FOCAC. A lot of African leaders now heading to Beijing for that, but what are they expected to bring back to the continent?
Well, basically, of course, since the FOCAC forum started in 2000, there's always been the question that although it is crafted on a win-win formula in terms of mutual benefits, to an extent one can say that Africa has still gotten the short end of the piece, and therefore what they are likely to be asking for is that how can you ensure that the benefits that come also help Africans in terms of employment opportunities, in terms of capacity building, and in terms of making sure that there's longevity in the kind of investments that find place.
All right. Professor, we appreciate those insights. Thank you very much for talking to us. We had here in studio Professor Adams Olo.